Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. So today we have kind of an ambiguous title, a particular social mechanism. The reason why I put this title is twofold. First of all, I didn't really know what to put as a title. You will see that this episode might be more complex than usual, more complicated, not necessarily difficult. And so, with all this content, I wasn't really able to come up with a title that could summarize it at best. So, I thought to put something ambiguous, which is not very precise. And since it is not precise, it can cover a number of topics, and particularly, it can cover all the things we will say throughout this episode. The second reason why I put this title is because, in fact, we will talk about a social mechanism, kind of a fascinating one. But you will see what I'm talking about throughout this episode. Now, let's begin. A few days ago, I came across a very small page of self-improvement, basically still growing and not so popular. The page, it was an Instagram page, offers tips and suggestions on how to make one's life better and succeed. Now, as soon as I saw that page, I didn't really think that much. I didn't really stop and start to think about that page. But after a few days, I actually did. It was some days ago. To be more specific, it was some nights ago, because I the inspiration for this episode came during a night. I can't remember if it was like 4 or 5 nights ago. I can't remember exactly, but I kind of wanted to say that I thought about this episode during the night because I realized that the night is the time in which perhaps I think more, in the sense that I have my best intuitions. And I believe that that is because half of me, we could say, he's sleeping, and the other half is awake. So I have the best of both worlds. The part of me which is sleeping is able, this lack of self-consciousness, is able to think more creatively, think more, have more intuitions. And the other part, which is instead awake, is able to systematically, we could say, take that information, that sort of creative information, and elaborate it rationally in order to in order to make a thought, we could say. And so I wanted to say, because I believe that that's kind of funny. I've always thought, the we could say, generally on life when I'm sleeping. I mean, while going to sleep, while in bed, trying to to fall asleep, and in the middle of the night. I've always done that. I feel, as I said, that is maybe something that many people do because of this ability to have the best of both worlds. I don't know. Of course, however, that intuition I had during that night was expanded and developed while I was totally awake some days ago. But when I was thinking about that page of self improvement, I sort of made a comparison. I thought I can create a YouTube channel in which I talk about how to cook food. This is possible only because I have practical knowledge about the field. So the value of my knowledge lies in the fact that I am able to cook a dish. I am able to do something. So I had that page of self improvement in the back of my mind. And while I had it, I was thinking about something else, which was what I just said. Someone, let's say I do that, can create a YouTube channel in which they talk about how to cook dishes. And they can do that because they know that they have some kind of practical knowledge. And so they know that what they say has a value, we could say, in itself, let's say. And so they know that they can create that YouTube channel because why not share something you know with basically everyone, with an infinite number of people. Now, after I made that thought, I thought about that page of self improvement. I will use the example of the YouTube channel because that's what I thought and that's what I relate to more. but the same, of course, can be applied to an Instagram page. Now, let's imagine a YouTube channel which gives tips instead of how to cook on how to succeed. The value of that knowledge should lie in the fact that the person who has that channel has in fact succeeded. And we could say that to succeed for them could mean to have a famous YouTube channel, since seemingly that's something they want to do, considering they have created it. But if the person hasn't in fact succeeded, I mean, the YouTube channel is not very famous, their tips and suggestions wouldn't seem proven. So, after thinking about a YouTube channel in which a person shares their knowledge on how to cook, I thought about that page and I thought that it was kind of funny because that person was sharing tips on how to succeed, even though they hadn't really succeeded. And as I said, to succeed, we could say that in this case is to have a famous YouTube channel. So after thinking this, I thought again, um, let's imagine a YouTube channel in which I talk about how to cook food, even though I don't know how to cook food, even though I have no practical knowledge, no practical skill. I sort of made this comparison because if you think about it, that's kind of similar. I created a YouTube channel in which I try to cook food, to cook dishes. I share what I do, and perhaps I share what I theoretically know about how to cook dishes. But you see that if you sort of pick the example of the case, we could say, of the page of self-improvement, not so famous, which gives tips on how to succeed, and you sort of remove the field of self-improvement, place another field, we could say, of course, to cook, then that thing doesn't really make sense. How can you share tips on how to cook if you don't know how to cook yourself? And so this doubt, which I came up with, is sort of summarized in the question one, in a question which one person could ask the person who has the YouTube channel, which gives tips on how to succeed. And that question is the following: you talk about succeeding and you haven't even succeeded. Now, at this point, one might ask, who are you, as in me, Stefano, to define that the success of a person can be measured with the success of their YouTube channel? Because just some minutes ago, I said that to succeed could mean for them to have a famous YouTube channel. This question is legitimate. Of course, they might have something else. But I want to point out again that we could say that to succeed could mean to have a famous YouTube channel, since seemingly that's something they want to do. If I create a YouTube channel and I give tips on how to succeed, perhaps it's because I want to succeed with my YouTube channel. Why not? Otherwise, I wouldn't have created it. And so this maybe sort of sound wrong, but if you think about it, if one gives tips on how to succeed and shows nothing about other accomplishments, which might reflect a certain degree of success, then the YouTube channel is the only thing I can look at to measure the success. If the channel is successful, then that's at least a small proof of the validity of the tips. But if it's not, one can't really decide whether the tips are useful or not. So what I say that to succeed could mean for them to have a YouTube channel is not because success equals having a famous YouTube channel, but if you share tips on how to succeed and show nothing about your life besides the YouTube channel, then what should I consider? Your life? I don't know you. I should consider your famous YouTube channel. But if your YouTube channel is not really that famous, then that's the whole thing is ambiguous. And also, if you think about it, how is that person able to know that the tips they are sharing are correct? That the tips they are sharing are actually useful to succeed if they haven't even succeeded on that YouTube channel? That's kind of, in my opinion, ambiguous. I'm not saying that's totally wrong, that's ambiguous. Now, let's take a small pause because I want to talk about my channel. As soon as I started to think about this episode, I wondered if all these things could be applied to my situation. At first, I thought they could, but then I realized that the value of my videos, of my knowledge, of my reasoning, should lie, and I want to stress that should, in the reasonings themselves. In other words, my statements shouldn't really be judged according to how famous I am or to what intellectual accomplishments I've achieved. Of course, having an acclaimed background might be useful, but if I'm making videos of me thinking about something, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is how well structured are the steps of the reasoning argumentation. I'm not saying you need to think like this in order to achieve this or that or anything like that. I mean, I might have said something like knowing this can be helpful, but even at that point, you don't really value what I say according to my situation, but according to how helpful the videos sound to you. On the other hand, suggestions and tips on how to be successful need to be judged according to the person saying them. Because if I am very successful in the eyes of the listener, and I say something like doing push ups first thing in the morning is beneficial, there's a good chance that that is true, assuming I'm not lying. But if I am in a bad position, according to the listener's perspective, I really can't talk because the things I say do not have anything, literally anything, to back them up. That is not to say that anything can be taken seriously. Some things might actually make sense and be correct, but who knows? Instead, as I said, reasoning can be evaluated instantly. At most, it can take for granted things that are not correct. But then, if we know what is at the base of the reasoning, as soon as we verify the assumptions, we know if the reasoning is good or not. So, to repeat it in other words, our reasoning is, at least it should always be valuable in itself. The best thing that can happen, I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that I make such a reasoning while assuming specific things. Sorry, but once we know what assumptions I have got, then we can sort of value the reasoning in itself. We can say, okay, assuming those kind of things, then what you say is correct or not. If it is not correct, it's not a reasoning, it's something messy, we could say. If it is correct, we have value in that reasoning. Then, of course, we need to verify the assumptions, and that ultimately will sort of solidify the argumentation or destroy it. But the reasoning itself should always be correct because in its nature it has to be logical, we could say. It has to be rational, it has to be correct in itself. What do you think? This is my position. I'm definitely open to discuss it, and I'm aware that this is a tricky topic. And I also want to point out that whatever I say is by no means an accusation to anyone. These are literally my thoughts, which in my opinion make a certain degree of sense, but of course I know that something might be wrong. Now back to the main topic. While thinking about this whole problem, an analogy came to my mind that might explain my perspective better. I imagine someone, let's call him John, who gives tips on how to make money. I imagine John being asked by someone else, let's say Anna, how to really make money. John says that he wants to be paid for revealing such a secret. Anna pays him. Then John tells Anna that to make money, she simply needs to tell other people that she knows how to make money. If someone asks, she has to say that she wants to be paid, and once she gets paid, she tells the other person that they need to do the same exact thing. In that case, does John make money? Yes. Will we say that he knows how to make money? Probably not, because his tactics seems extremely unstable. It doesn't really have the knowledge on how to do something concretely and sell it. At least that's the feeling I get. And that same feeling is what I feel when I think about the case of the self improvement page on Instagram. I'm not saying that the two situations are the same, of course not, but I wanted to point out this sort of analogy because that feeling of instability that I have while thinking to that analogy is the same I get while I am thinking, while I am reflecting on the pages of self-improvement, which give tips on how to succeed, and they still don't have succeeded. Sorry, and they still haven't succeeded. Again, because what the person is selling is not a product, but some kind of knowledge. I mean, considering the case of the self improvement page, YouTube channel, because that is not a product but some kind of knowledge, I feel like the whole thing is completely unstable. It's kind of it's not anything that has a practical utility, anything that is concrete. It is something sort of abstract. And that's why I'd instinctively call this, instead of content, meta content, even though I have not enough experience with this word meta. It was something that just came up in my mind, and I have a feeling that I might be right to some degree, maybe in some way. So you have this YouTube channel which gives tips on how to succeed, and I would classify that as meta content because it is not really practical, concrete, something that people can see. It is something abstract. It is something we could say transcendent in the sense that it is not really here right now, but it is something kind of on another dimension, on something it is something we can't really see. Now, there's another aspect I want to discuss. By doing so, by creating a channel in which I give tips on how to succeed, the only way in which I can, in fact, succeed is if people believe that what I say is valuable. I want to stress the term believe. Back to the previous example, if I want to learn how to cook something and I find a YouTube channel that explains that, there's not much to believe. Either the dish is what I want or not. It's not that I believe it is what I want. If the person shows me the food is prepared, then it is what I want. Instead, with tips and suggestions, it's the person to believe. It's not a matter of facts. If the person believes they need that advice, they'll listen to me. Otherwise, they won't. But here's the tricky part. Because one, I don't do anything, and so one can't really evaluate the utility of what I say because I don't create something which has some kind of practical utility, but something which is much more abstract. And two, knowledge can be very difficult to evaluate as valid or wrong, especially because it tends to be evaluated correctly only according to other prior knowledge. But if a person only has a fraction of the prior knowledge they would need, and that fraction makes them think that the knowledge they are taking into consideration is correct, then most likely they will think that knowledge is correct. It is proven, as a matter of fact, that there are several biases which can contribute to this phenomenon. In other words, knowledge kind of tends to create a system for itself, where everything is cohesive to the person living the experience. So, because of these two reasons, my success is, in my opinion, likely to increase faster than if I created something concrete. In other words, that type of knowledge, being very much self referential and likely to create a perspective in the individual it, that sustains it, it tends to get regarded positively much more easily. And so people who seemingly give this type of knowledge to other people tend to succeed, at least in the short to medium term, without doing anything practical. I say short to medium term because success can be obtained as easily as it can be lost in this case. As a matter of fact, it is sufficient that some knowledge of the same nature but with different content sinks in for whatever reason, and the old knowledge is disregarded because nothing was holding it. And these two knowledges, one new and the other old, go of course hand in hand with the person or people behind them. Someone will start to acquire success, someone else will go down and be forgotten. And I want to repeat this passage with other words. The success is can go up and down quite fast, we could say, because the people that are sort of consuming that content or that meta content, if you want, have to believe it is something they need. And beliefs come and go usually. I mean, here we are not talking about the beliefs of the fundamental values of humanity, those kind of things. Here we are talking about beliefs of daily situations. And so these kind of beliefs, which most of the time are sustained by feelings, come and go at a rapid pace. I can say for myself that like 2 years ago, I thought that I really needed to watch every sort of video of a channel of self improvement because I thought that I had sort of the need to watch to learn those things. Now, of course, something of that was useful, at least in my opinion. But after some time, after having sort of thought that maybe I don't really need to watch those kind of things, it is much better to do some practical thing. After having changed my belief, I now watch very, very rarely that channel. And so you see that these beliefs, these beliefs, sorry, and these feelings come and go. And so success can come easily, and can go as easily. However, things might not go down that path I just described. In fact, here's perhaps the trickiest part of this episode. I start with no success, giving tips on how to succeed. If during the time, during the months, during maybe even years, I start to acquire success for whatever reason, I mean, and this reason is perhaps is because many people start to believe that they need my advice. Then I'll start to be considered reliable. Then I'll start to gain a good amount of success. And at that point, people will think, you see, he shared tips on how to succeed, and he has in fact succeeded. Here's the proof that what he says is true. What he says, sorry for my English, is true. So you see what happened? I sort of transformed myself. I went from being someone who gives tips and suggestions about success without success and thus without proof of what I said to being someone whose tips are proven because he's successful. So in this case, nobody really remembers that in the beginning I started to succeed just because someone believed I was right, just because someone believed they needed my advice. Nobody knows that I acquired credibility from nothing, all because I produced this meta content which wasn't really tangible. Now, as a side note, I'm not saying that this always happens. As a matter of fact, one might actually be good, might actually say true things. But what I can say is that this can definitely happen. And I think that many people forget this. So you see that from nothing, I start to acquire success. I want to repeat this sentence because I believe that this kind of summarizes this concept. I went from being someone who gives tips and suggestions without success, and thus proof of what I said, to being someone whose tips are proven because he's successful. There's something kind of auto-referential. Now, while I was preparing this episode, I realized that this can also happen with influencers. Um, it's kind of a phenomenon of our age. There are these people, influencers, of course, we all know them, which have massive amounts of follower on Instagram, on YouTube, these platforms. It's funny and fascinating and confusing. I mean, if you tell somebody you don't care about what an influencer says, they might tell you something like, "Are you kidding? They're so famous." Almost implying that they are famous for a reason, and thus what I say has to be known. Well, that person who answers you that way might not realize that the influencer is famous because people gave them the possibility to be so. Something less fascinating but still very interesting is that once someone is at that state, they'll start to create something stable, something concrete, in order to maintain their success. That's comprehensible, but that's also bizarre. Now, what I was thinking about this episode, I came up with this sort of analogy, metaphor, call it whatever you want, this image. I imagined a man wanting to reach the sky. In order to reach it, he starts to build a ladder in order to go as high as he can. That's a normal people, let's say. And then there's another man who wants to do the same thing. But who knows why? He randomly skyrockets towards the sky for a few seconds. At a certain height, he decides to build a ladder in the air. And he is able, in fact, to do that. So he is, at least in the short term, ahead of the other men. That's how crazy this mechanism sounds to me. To explain this image, of course, the two men are simply two people. The ladder is what they create in order to reach the sky, and the sky is the success. The ladder is literally what they do in order to gain success, we could say. But on one hand, we have the normal man, which starts from the ground to build that ladder. And on the other hand, we have the influencer, which skyrockets towards the sky simply because someone helped him, we could say, simply because people believed something. So the influencer didn't really do them. The influencer, I mean, that person, wherever that may be, didn't really do anything. They just skyrocketed towards the sky, and once they are at a certain height, they start to create something stable because they want to maintain their success, and they are in fact able to do that because, let's say, the influencer are able, as a matter of fact, when they have a certain degree of success, to sort of create something. Let's say a personal brand, a business. Most often than not, it is a business, and that business, once it is created, it is something stable. So that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of mind blowing if you think about it. That from nothing they are able to reach a certain height without any ladder, and then at that point they say, okay, now I'm going to build a ladder, and that ladder still holds up in the middle of the air. That is something, I mean, that's something mind-blowing. I hope that I explained myself clearly, but if you have doubts or you want to understand better or you want to say your opinion, of course, comments are well accepted. But I genuinely, I am genuinely trying to explain myself at best because this is something quite crazy in my opinion. Another aspect which I thought about is the following. A person who has a YouTube channel in which they give tips and suggestions might not have actually that much experience if they are not very famous. Now, they might have had it subjectively, but objectively, they're the only person they consider. So they might say, like, I had a bad day, but I keep pushing because some bad news won't stop me. Because subjectively, that's what they feel. But perhaps if they talked to other people, that thing wouldn't actually seem so bad. So they label their feelings in a certain way and react accordingly. And in doing that, they might sustain or create a world in which other people resonate with them and start to feel bad for something which might have been something very shallow or something that, if people generally consider it normal, they themselves would consider normal too. Perhaps if they had some kind of experience, they might realize that the thing that happened to them wasn't really bad, especially if compared to something else they experienced after some time. They experienced after some time sort of spent gaining experience. As a matter of fact, I recently came up with the following idea. That's literally an idea, a feeling. There's a tendency to consider our own negative emotions as something nobody else feels, as something totally special, which we have to fight against in despair. This goes hand in hand with the progressive rise of subjectivity and especially individualism, I guess. So everybody uses themselves as a yardstick, as the measurement for everything else. So the person genuinely thinks that the things they want to say are quite valuable, even though they don't have that much experience of the word. And I'm totally guilty of this too. Otherwise, I wouldn't have created this YouTube channel in the first place. But what can I say? Only that I am, I guess, aware of this, nothing else. Maybe this tendency is something positive, maybe not. Maybe it's something neutral, maybe it doesn't even exist, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But, well, maybe somebody does know that. I don't, honestly. That's a feeling. I feel that there's this tendency among people, but um, that's far as it gets. That's as far as it gets, a feeling. Now, I think I ended the things I had to say about the topic itself. I finally want to conclude um, by explaining a bit perspective I've recently developed after having thought these things. This whole concept of creating something from nothing, basically, has led me to disregard the idea of focusing primarily on giving other people advice. When I first started this channel, which I did for several reasons, one was that I had the idea of wanting to help people with abstract intellectual videos. Perhaps I am in fact helping someone, or at least I am making videos someone actually finds interesting. But I realized that only doing this can hardly become something valuable through time. If I only give tips and suggestions, it's hard to do much good. So I realized that concrete, tangible things need to be done. With tangible things, I mean personalized paths of improvement. So, for example, I can give tips to people on how to eat healthy, but something tangible consists in following them step by step and helping them to actually improve, to actually start a daily habit of eating healthy. Those kind of things. Instead of giving tips on how to take a new perspective on the world, starting some kind of therapeutic practice would be something tangible. These are just examples, of course. I don't know, honestly, what to do in the future, but I kind of know that I want to do something practical. I kind of realized that something practical is needed. Just having a YouTube channel isn't enough to help people, in my opinion, or at least that's what I think now. So that was the end of this episode. Let me know what you think in the comments if you want. I really put some work into preparing this episode. Maybe because what I wanted to say was too complicated, I wasn't really able to express my sort of feelings, my thoughts about this. So maybe this episode wasn't really that good for you, but I've got to tell you, I honestly did care a lot about this, so I really hope that I explained myself correctly at best, really. So, this is it for today's episode. See you guys.